over 7 million different animals inhabit our planet.
In India, I met farmers whose crops have been literally washed away by historic flooding. In America, I have witnessed unprecedented droughts in California. In Greenland and in the Arctic, I was astonished to see that ancient glaciers are rapidly disappearing, well ahead of scientific predictions. All that I have seen and learned on my journey has absolutely terrified me.
So the question now is whether we will have the courage to act before it's too late. And how we answer will have a profound impact on the world that we leave behind, not just to you, but to your children and to your grandchildren. As a president, as a father, and as an American, I'm here to say we need to act.
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
All right, welcome to the Awesome Creatures Podcast. This is Chris.
Hi, this is Jesse.
Jesse, welcome back.
Oh, thank
you.
you.
It's great to have you.
Oh, it's great to be back.
Yeah, I know. On this news episode, it's going to be like, they never know who they're going to get. They're going to get me, and then they don't know who. It could be Jim. It could be Jesse. It could be Angie. But thank you for... I know. Thanks for coming back. She's still on holiday. She gets to go back to Florida next week, and maybe she'll fill in next Friday. I told her people got to hear her voice. But it's great to have you, and it's great. Jim Winepress has been fantastic, too. So it's good to have new friends helping us out on the podcast that are super knowledgeable, by the way.
Oh, thank
you.
Yeah, I'm glad to help out.
Yeah. So just to open up this week, I have literally, Jesse, on my phone, like, I know Google has an algorithm.
Yeah.
Depending on what you browse. And so they start just feeding you news articles.
Mm-hmm.
My phone has been overwhelmed because I forward myself all these emails so I can look at them and read them. I've had literally 10 stories this week that I could have picked from.
Yeah, it's been a pretty busy week. When you asked me to do this, I kind of looked at the same thing, and I take screenshots of my phone when I look at stuff. And yeah, it's been quite a busy week in the wildlife world.
Absolutely it has. And so I picked the three that I really wanted to talk about. But before I jump into my article, I do want to give an update on the whaling situation in Iceland, because I saw this a couple days ago. And I didn't want to spend a ton of time on it because I just talked about the Iceland whale hunt. So Iceland has started to hunt endangered fin whales.
Mm-hmm.
Just to recap, if people have not listened to the news, I think it was 2 weeks ago. Jim and I talked about it. The company that is hunting these whales are going to turn them into nutraceuticals, basically vitamins and junk, because yeah, the whale meat market is minuscule best. A lot of people in Iceland actually, or the majority of Icelanders don't support the whaling industry. They still have pretty good support there though. So that's something to remember. Like 40% support hunting whales. But this company, it's been a hiatus for 2 years, but they started hunting again this year, and they've to date killed 21 fin whales. And just this week, it came out that they killed a blue whale. And the blue whale is critically endangered. Yeah, that's why I'm bringing this up, because it is infuriating. They have killed a blue whale. The experts have looked at the photos. They've identified it as a young male. And they have actually, the company has responded and said, oh no, it's not a blue whale. It's a fin whale, blue whale hybrid. So I would, like to ask, and maybe I can send Dr. Getz an email and ask her if that's even feasible. And I'll try to make a note on that. I'm actually going on holiday tomorrow, but I will see if I can shoot her an email and see if I can see if that's even feasible for blue and fin whales to breed and mate. I didn't have time to look, because I would start looking at their chromosome count and seeing and if that's even normal in nature. I think it's the company trying to cover themselves, obviously.
Yeah.
But that's an infuriating update, but like I promised, I'll keep listening and keep looking out for that because I think we should still continue to boycott Iceland. Let them know we're not going to spend any money there. We're not going to travel there. Until this horrific practice is stopped, because killing endangered whales is just wrong. Wrong.
It makes no sense to hunt something that's endangered.
Yeah. I mean, especially blue whale. My God, they're barely recovering. We had Dr. Getz on here. Their generation interval is so long. So, anyways, it's infuriating. Okay, so Jesse, just moving on to the good news. This is the good news week, I guess. Yes, some of these stories, it's always not good news. Hold on. Are all my stories crap? Not really. I don't know. Your stories aren't too bad.
I try.
Yeah. Okay. So my first story is kind of an update on the extinction crisis. And actually, Jesse, I don't know how many people listened to episode 1. It was just me, myself, and I before Angie, got plugged in. I knew we were going to do the podcast together, but I just kind of wanted to do like a prelude, a 0 episode, even though I numbered it number 1, and just said, hey, this is my motivation for doing this podcast. And in that podcast, I talk about extinction rates. So just this week, it came out in the news that this headline is humans are causing animals and plants to go extinct 1,000 times faster than their natural rate. Wow. So these are scientists. Yeah. Now, when I did that first pod, I looked into a lot of this, and I've been looking at this for the last few years. The normal extinction background rate, like especially for mammals, is 1 to 2 per 100 years.
Is that so?
Okay.
I think it'd be a bit more.
Yeah. So I mean, every 100 years, 1 or 2 mammals should go extinct, and it varies across taxa. So, but I focused in on mammals, and in the last 100 years, we've had close to 70 mammals go extinct. Okay, so our extinction rate has gone way up. When they look across all taxa, plants and all sorts of different animals, they realize the extinction rate right now, like I said, is 1,000 times faster than natural rate. And so that's where they're leading to this 6 mass extinction, or what they're calling this 6 mass extinction. And, that's what we're trying to do with this podcast.
Introduction to the Anthropocene. Yeah.
Yes. Is, hey, this is happening. We need to come together as a species and fight it, right? So this article talks about Sudan. We've talked about that. The last northern white rhino, when he went extinct. They do highlight, and I know you could probably speak about this, especially with birds, but with amphibians, the amphibian extinction rate is 49,000 times faster than normal.
Yeah, and that's just with one fungus.
Yeah.
It's just one disease that's wiping out all these amphibian species.
It's insane. It is so scary. It is so scary. Like, it's not, I just don't understand why this isn't in the news. It is in the news, but it's not making bigger news than it is, because the amphibians, or losing this many amphibians, is just gonna affect so much in a bad way, right? It's just, for us, I think. I don't know. Yeah. So some of the things they bring up too with this is, which was interesting. I haven't seen this twist, so this was new for me. So what they say, or what they quote, is like, for example, animals with larger bodies, they believe they're more extinct prone than smaller animals.
Okay. That makes sense. Yep.
Also, they're saying it's not occurring randomly across ecosystems, but is disproportionately affecting similar species that perform similar functions.
All right.
So they go on to say, given that ecosystems rely on particular groups of organisms for particular roles, such as pollination or seed dispersal, that loss of one such group could cause considerable disruption. So like elephants, I just go back to my favorite elephants. They're very important in seed dispersal. They eat an acacia tree.
Yep.
They get some of the seeds. They digest it, but while they're digesting it, they go 60 kilometers away. They poop. In that poop, they disperse the seeds. And we know that's important in bats and all these other taxa.
Oh, indeed.
So,
that's probably one of the most important things we need to keep nature resilient.
Right. So when you start taking that out, and then what they're saying is, okay, well, you lose that seed dispersal. Well, things that depend on those plants are going to be affected, right? So you're going to see huge effects. Overall, what they're saying is this is alarming. We need to do something. We're not going to lose leaves off the tree. We're going to lose whole branches off the tree. So anyways, just that is what I covered when we started this podcast. It's there. The data's still there. So as it comes up, I'll definitely be talking about it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good
stuff,
yeah, it's quite depressing.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Well, what do you got?
Well, I'd like to think it's an answer. That's what I've got. A lot of this, we hear this doom and gloom when we see, entire native animals disappear from island environments because of exotic species taking over development. But I found this article and I liked it. It's a couple weeks old now, but it's considered an answer. And so what it is, it's a group of Australian researchers that have had a thought, and they've decided to declare to the world what we're doing wrong in terms of conservation. And the current policy attempts in order to preserve the world create these arbitrary goals, these blind targets that say we should protect 20% of the world, or we should protect 15%. And, we'll do this by a certain date. And the actual targets are 17% of terrestrial areas and 10% of marine areas by 2020, essentially in 2 years. But where'd those numbers come from? Why are we doing that? Are we throwing these numbers out, these stats out there because we think they're realistic? We think we can accomplish this? And these researchers are arguing that we'll never accomplish these goals just because there are people that are fighting and saying, what does this mean? Why do we have to do this? So this answer that they're coming up with is essentially looking at how conservation can be measured, how nature can be measured in terms of providing what we need from nature and what nature needs for itself. And so there's always been this question when people are trying to protect land or protect wildlife and saying, how relevant is this slug to our economy? How relevant is this tree to our country? And by doing this research and crunching all these numbers, they're essentially asking everybody to examine this data and say, well, this is actually needed for us because it participates in this ecosystem that provides all these ecosystem services, such as nutrient cycling and pollination and flood protection and cleaning our air and cleaning our water. And these are actually critical things that we need as a society. Because if nature stopped providing those ecosystem services, we would still need them. And we would look straight at technology at providing the answer. But that answer is going to come at a cost that maybe our economies aren't ready for because nature gave it to us for free. So yeah, it's suddenly this light bulb moment in which these researchers are saying, hey, let's take a step back. Let's actually answer all of our critics' answers with real data and say, yep, we need this forest over here. You can't put a mine in there because it protects our water, our watershed. Or they can say, you know what? Go ahead and log that forest because we've got all this other forest protected. And yes, we do need to provide for our economies as well. And we can replant that forest later, do restoration efforts. So yeah, it's a really big move forward, I think, in terms of what conservation needs.
It does. And it's interesting, listening to you talk. Because, the story I opened with, besides the whales, the extinction rate, right? It's not good news, right? It's horrible news. It's scary news. But it's opening some people's eyes. So then when you have scientists like this saying, okay, this is happening. We're losing this biodiversity. We need to look at it at a different way. Because what I was getting out of that article was the current model of just saying, hey, we're going to take 10 miles here square and put a protection around it, or 100 kilometers square, and that's protected area, but you can do whatever you want outside of it. that doesn't take into consideration, right? That
Yeah.
all, so like we've been talking about umbrella species, and sometimes that's not always the best foot forward. So yeah, that's ambitious.
Yep. Yeah.
You
And they really want to make it a regional focus too. They don't want to make this a very global approach. They want to say, hey, look at your city, right? Look at what your city needs in order to survive. How much agricultural land do you need? How many reservoirs and access to rivers do you need? How much forest do you need to recycle your air? And then look at that on a regional scale. And then you can do it on a bigger scale. You can do it on a smaller scale. And look at all the differences in that. And decide as a community, as a society, where you need to protect things. Because it's not only about what you protect, but where you protect as well. Because it's not going to help if in New Zealand they protect everything on the South Island and they degrade everything on the North Island. And the major cities over here are struggling with air pollution and water pollution, whereas all the cities in the South Island are like, yep, we're sweet as.
Yep. Yeah. It's interesting. It's a good way to think, and just, I know Angie and I, sometimes we're like, to fight for conservation, let's put a dollar sign behind it. Bats in the United States, $4 to $5 billion economic benefit of free pest control to farmers. That is a real
it's hard to argue with that
benefit. Yeah, but is that what we should be talking about? Just putting money on a species and say, okay, well, bats do that, but this bird doesn't, so we don't care. But that's not a good answer.
No, because the ecosystem is what provides the services, not just the one little part of it. Because that bat needs a whole. If you look at that bat, you've got to figure out then, okay, what does it take to support that bat? And it might be that that bird does something for that bat. So if we're like, oh, we don't worry about that bird, and then we realize, why are our bat numbers falling? It could be that for some reason that bird ate some type of insect that could harm the bat. And that's the type of research we don't know until, everything starts degrading. Until they're gone. We're like, oh, crap, we should not have done that.
Yeah. Nature finds a way.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just, we start tinkering with everything, and it's not always a good thing. Well, my next story, again, it's not the best news, but it is highlighting, I think, again, what's going on out there. So it's good that some of this is making some waves. And I thought it was interesting because I would have thought killer whales were doing pretty okay in the ocean, but they're really not.
No.
And the southern resident killer whale, which I would think would be down near us, but it's actually not. That's up in the Pacific Northwest of the United States or North America. So from Alaska down. But really, this is the Washington, Oregon area and Vancouver, Canada. So they are listing that orca population as endangered.
Yeah, I remember that from a few years ago.
Yeah. The reason being is because of Chinook salmon. So these whales primarily hunt Chinook salmon. Chinook salmon population has decreased drastically. I remember I lived up there. My dad lives in Oregon. I grew up in California. Salmon were getting protected because, damming up rivers and a lot of the other stuff that's happening up there with, a sprawling populace.
Essentially it took out all the ways the salmon breed.
Right. Yep. Yeah. So anyways, we're talking about trickle up, trickle down effects. Well, here's one. It's not that the whales are being hunted or boat strikes or things like that, which does happen, not so much the hunting, but the boat strikes and things. It's because of the decrease in salmon, you're seeing this decrease in orcas in that area, in that population. They're decreasing. Also, there's a concern that Canada wants to put this oil pipeline from, I think, Alberta out to Vancouver.
Yeah.
And that's going, and it's going right through their territory or right through where these whales are. So they think that not so much maybe boat strikes, but just the noise, the increase in boat traffic, these large vessels, if there's an oil spill, it's going to have a major impact on these whales. So they're arguing, they're trying to get them on the Endangered Species Act they were listed on the Endangered Species Act. So they're looking at trying to continue their protections. again, I thought it was an interesting story because it wasn't so much these whales being hunted. It's just that their food source was going away.
Yeah.
And again, it just leads into what we've just been talking about the last 20 minutes.
Yeah, it's a huge cascade effect. I mean, in that part of the world, there's heaps of seabirds. Their populations are plummeting as well. And birds like murres and guillemots and cormorants. All their numbers are drastically dropping. And there's something going on in the ecosystem. And, it's quite obvious that the iconic orca, everybody sees that. Everybody wants to see it. And then the salmon, which we all like to eat, those are going to be two big ones we focus on. But there's all this other wildlife that may not be getting attention. It's definitely having cascading effects. There's more than just the, what meets the eye, for sure.
Right. And it's like, talking about the boat traffic. This quote I wanted to read is this one from NOAA. He's Lynn Bear, and he writes, just the presence of boats can cause the whales to spend less time feeding. It's harder for them to communicate, so they have to call louder and longer when boats are nearby, so they tend to avoid those areas. So again, when you have a population that's struggling to survive, that's endangered, and you're taking away huge swaths of it, or they're avoiding certain areas, they don't have time to adapt. I mean, these,
no, they don't. No.
I mean, with killer whales too, it's like, I just remember the ones with that beach themselves to get the seals.
Yeah.
They learn from mama.
Yeah.
They watch mama do that over and over. They know what channels to swim up, to get close. They know how to catch them and all that stuff. These whales know how to catch salmon and, not much else. So you take that away and it's devastating.
Yeah. I mean, there used to be heaps of seals in that area too. And there was this big, they called it sealing. You essentially go out, you kill the seals, you sell its fur, and you sell the oil. And there's probably a good chance orca were eating a lot of those seals that were in that area. But as the seals disappeared, the orca died out that could hunt them. They lost that ability to hunt.
Yeah. So again, we got to continue the fight and spread awareness, So what's next? What do you got next?
Yeah, that's all you can do at this point. I've got something a bit controversial. Everybody's heard of palm oil, at least everybody that tries to pay attention to wildlife conservation. And I've got an article that says how great palm oil is for conservation.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So a lot of people are probably asking, Jesse, what are you reading? This is out of The Guardian. So it's pretty solid journalism there.
News.
Yep. And it's essentially, it goes into why palm oil is bad. All this deforestation is happening throughout the tropics, mainly in Malaysia and Indonesia. Over 190 species are already threatened with extinction, are having worse problems because of this. And this is your Sumatran tigers and your orangutans and tapir and heaps of other animals. The amount of palm oil plantations in the world collectively use an area that's the size of the United Kingdom. That's a pretty decent sized area.
Yeah.
However, palm oil produces 35% of all the vegetable oils in the world, and it only requires 10% of the land.
I know.
So
I read that.
1 ton of palm oil can be produced from just over half an acre, compared to olive oil, which is 1 acre, sunflower oil, which is 3.5 acres, or soybean oil, which is nearly 5. So essentially, palm oil is some of the most efficient vegetable oil that we can produce. And if we were to just cut out palm oil completely in all of our production lines, whether it's cosmetics or food or biofuels, we would essentially have to use more land and more resources to produce other types of vegetable oils. And the demand of vegetable oils is actually it's going up rapidly. It's supposed to double. The amount of vegetable oils demanded is going to double within the next 30 years. So the problem is that, hey, we've got this really cool vegetable oil. It works really well. We've actually found a way to put it in all of our products, but it's causing all this degradation in this big swath of the tropics. And this this article kind of dug into why. And it's not so much that they're just clearing habitat, but it's because these companies are trying to be quite cheap with their production, as any company would, as any household would. And so they're buying the cheapest land they can get. And that means, pretty much the forest that we see out there, the virgin forest or the undeveloped forest. And the land is cheap for a reason. And these palms, they produce low yields of oil.
Right.
And the reason why these companies don't go after the better land is because it's already used for other reasons. Or it could be divided up in all these little tiny lots that are owned by various people. And it would take too much time and effort and money to buy up all of this nice land that may be degraded and not used for anything. But it takes too much effort to buy all these different parcels of land to create your oil plantation, palm oil plantation, when it's just easier to buy this really cheap land. And, you're going to make heaps of oil anyway. But imagine if they started buying this good land that wasn't being used very efficiently or very well. The production could probably be a lot better and would actually save all this habitat that they're destroying. So there are sustainable measures on making palm oil sustainable, but it's very poorly measured. It's very poorly regulated. There's a lot of companies out there that have said, yep, I will be a sustainable palm oil producer, but they only go so far, and then they realize they've got some production outputs to make, and so they just go and buy out all this other land and cause deforestation because, does that label really mean anything? Am I making more money because of that label? No, I'm not.
Right.
So the struggle here is trying to find out, what does it mean to be sustainable? How do we get the producers to jump onto this, make it valuable to them? And the only way we can do that is if we urge our governments to make it a big deal. Because right now you go to the store and palm oil's got all sorts of different names. And you look at the package and some say palm oil and some have all sorts of other names for palm oil. But you can't determine which one's sustainable and which one isn't. You've got to do a lot of research to figure that out. And one of the easiest ways to do it is create some type of label, put it on the product if it is. And then that way we can continue to support this highly valuable crop that we actually need. I've gone from hearing how terrible palm oil is and saying, okay, I'll listen to that. I understand that. And I'll jump onto that bandwagon, to doing quite a bit of reading and research myself to realize, oh, wait, maybe there's a lot more to this story, and I should support palm oil, but I should support truly sustainable palm oil.
Right. Yeah, that's what I've heard. I've heard the sustainable isn't really that sustainable, meaning it's, like you said, it needs better regulation. When you were talking about that, Jesse, it made me think, okay, first of all, understanding what's going on with palm oil for our listeners is awesome that you're bringing this story up, because every issue we bring up is not a black and white. I mean, the whaling thing, it's, I've said it before, I don't like whaling. I'm against it, but if there's sustainable populations of whales that they go out, I mean, who am I to tell other cultures how to live? Yeah. But going and killing a blue whale is a big deal to me. Like, that is wrong. Fin whale to me is wrong. But palm oil, as we understand this issue more, we can find more effective ways. We vote with our dollars. That's what we constantly say in this podcast. Show these businesses what we support. And I'll tell you what it made me really think of was dolphin safe tuna. Before, and my uncles were tuna fishermen, it affected my family. They had to keep, it was certified. They had to certify that it was dolphin safe, meaning, the bycatch of dolphins was minuscule or none. And where before, they'd go out and kill a bunch of dolphins and not even think about it. They've drowned in the tuna nets. It was part
of the trade,
Yeah. So, but now, it's dolphin safe tuna. Yeah. So we can do sustainable palm oil. It just, if there's a big enough outcry for it, somebody's going to step in and take charge of that. So that's good. That's really good.
That's what we could do, Done? Chris. Let's make palm oil safe orangutans.
Yes.
or orangutan safe palm oil. That's probably what it should be. Not palm oil safe orangutans.
Yeah.
That's what you want, but what you need to buy is the orangutan safe palm oil.
Yes. I mean, yeah, we'll just go travel Malaysia and Indonesia and give Jesse and Chris's label. It's good. Well, the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo app too is out there, and I don't know how well it works here in New Zealand, but at least in the States, people swear by it.
Yeah, there's nothing out here yet. There's another big thing about palm oil in the news. Nestle decided to say, hey, we can't actually run our business on just sustainable palm oil. So they've actually said, hey, we can't be a part of this anymore because some of our palm oil actually has to come from unsustainable sources. And there's a handful of zoos and other organizations that are just dropping Nestle products from their organization as well. And Cheyenne Mountain Zoo is one of them. Zoos Victoria, Chester Zoo, and it's going to have a cascade effect.
I'm already boycotting Iceland. I was boycotting them in the World Cup. That's for sure. I mean, I love them. I love Iceland, their soccer team. It's a beautiful country. The people are supposed to be amazing, but, I was a little upset with what's going on with the whaling. Now I got to boycott Nestle, which I've looked, and there's a ton of products. Mm-hmm. I know Cadbury's one here, so I avoid them. We get Whitaker's chocolate anyways, much better. But Nestle is not one of my fan favorites, especially with this whole U.S. not against breastfeeding. It's just a lot of people think Nestle's behind it because they produce the most baby formula. So it's just they're not one of my. I'm not a fan of Nestle, so avoid them if you can. No more Kit Kats for the boys. Sorry, they shouldn't be eating it anyways. All right, my next story, Jesse.
Yes.
One of my favorite topics. So, there's a new book out on de-extinction, and I was debating whether to save this for next week.
It's a very favorite topic of yours.
Yes.
No, there'll be another story next week, Chris.
I know. That's why I was like, I might as well just talk about it now. So next week, I have an incredible interview on Thursday, and wait till our species comes out on Tuesday. The interview, we do touch upon this because this scientist, who you'll find out on Tuesday who she is, she, wrote an article on de-extinction and effects on conservation, things like that. So in this news article, a Swedish science journalist, Miss Toril Kornfeldt, she went around the world and interviewed scientists about their work in bringing back extinct animals. So this was and I'm like debating whether to give my money or maybe if my library can get it to support this book. I don't know yet, but I'm itching to read it because it seemed like it was a really positive, like de-extinction is going to be so great. And we can bring back all these species and this, that, and the other. Like they use Sudan as the example.
Yeah, he's been very popular in his death.
Yeah. And it's like, we could bring back the northern white rhino. And I know people that are working on doing that. I know them personally. You know them personally. You used to work with them. Yep. And they're doing it really to save the southern white rhino who needs it. So I just thought it was a really interesting thing. I'm interested to read this book. It's, Jurassic World, bringing back extinct animals. De-extinction, I'm absolutely 100% convinced now is not the answer. It is not worth the money. It is not worth the effort. We need that money to go to, African elephants, Asian elephants, white rhinos, the little spotted kiwi, all blue whales, all these animals here that are still living, breathing, they need our support, not a mammoth or an elephant hybrid, or not the Tasmanian tiger, which, just went extinct 100 years ago, but less than 100 years ago.
That's right.
But, there's so many animals. Support the platypus. The platypus needs help in Australia. Not the Tasmanian tiger. Actually, the Tasmanian devils are the ones that need the help, right?
Yeah, they're very close on the edge of extinction.
Yeah, and we're going to cover them at some point because, I saw them at the Auckland Zoo. So first time I ever saw them, I love those.
Pretty cool,
those
huh?
Tasmanian devils. Yeah, they're awesome. He was sleeping the whole time.
I spent 2 days in Tasmania trying to look for wild Tasmanian devils.
Oh, not easy, huh?
It's not easy at all. No, 2 whole days. 2 tanks of petrol, which isn't all that great for saying that.
Thanks for the environment.
Yeah.
The environment thanks you, Jesse.
Yep, and a dead wallaby that I found roadkill on the side of the road to try and assist me, and none of that worked.
Yeah, I know they're in big trouble. They have a really interesting story. I think within the next, I would say 10 species we cover, that will be one of them. We've got to do them.
Oh, awesome!
We've got to do them. So I really want to do them.
Yeah, bring in Taz. The whole Looney Tune reference, that'd be great.
Oh yeah, and just they're crazy funny. They're crazy funny little animals. All right, so you had an article on my old stomping ground, South Carolina, right?
That's right. Yeah. Down
I can
in
hear the banjos in the background.
That's right. They've made a name for themselves recently, and the people
hopefully good.
Well, the people that are very interested in South Carolina may not be the people we want to associate with. They are wildlife traffickers.
Oh God!
I know you talked about, was it last week? You talked about the poaching of a giraffe. It's probably I can't make this any more clear. Poaching is not isolated to Africa. I know when you hear poaching in the news, it's about Africa, it's about Asia, but poaching happens right in the Western world. It happens right in the U.S.
She paid. I mean, it wasn't a poaching, but it is still despicable in my mind. I just, trophy hunting. But you're right. Poaching is a huge problem.
Yes.
Like, we grew up in Florida, or you grew up in Florida. I lived there for a while. I mean, poaching of alligators. I hear about it all the time.
It's huge. Yeah. When I grew up in West Virginia, poaching of deer is very common. People just don't want to follow the regulations, and the regulations are there to protect the deer for everybody. So there's enough deer to go around.
True hunters should really detest poachers because
and they do.
Not only makes them look bad, but you're right. It hurts them.
It does. Yeah.
Less deer tags the next year, stuff like that.
Yep. So the big poaching that's happening in the Carolinas is reptiles. Now, who cares about snakes? Not very many people. Who cares about turtles? A few.
We do now.
Yeah. Now that we don't have them, we don't have snakes and turtles in New Zealand, but they are disappearing at a rapid rate within the southeastern U.S. And South Carolina has been kind of highlighted because, one, it has very few wildlife regulations, so very few laws around how wildlife can be collected and wildlife can be sold. And not only that, what few laws they have aren't even enforced because they don't have someone who actually focuses on enforcing wildlife. Essentially, there are dealers in South Carolina now making over $100,000 annually just by either collecting these animals from the wild and selling them to collectors or people that want to consume these animals, or they're acting as an intermediate where they're importing animals from, say, Africa or Asia, and they're bringing them into the States. And they're sending them out to collectors, or they're taking them from Africa and sending them on to Asia because they've already have those trade routes identified. And it's not just South Carolina; it's Florida, it's Georgia, it's Alabama, it's Texas. Anywhere where there are parts of the U.S. that have very little enforcement and very few laws, these wildlife traffickers are finding a way to make these deals happen.
Yeah. It's maddening, like the political climate in the United States. It gets a little maddening when there are regulations in place to protect, our wild places and wildlife for everybody, not just, conservation nuts like us or, people like that, but also hunters or people that do like to, I like to off-road. But I like to off-road in places where I'm not like running over turtles and other wildlife. Be respectful to the environment. So it's kind of sad. South Carolina gets a bad rap. I love South Carolina. I loved living there. I love Charleston, one of my favorite
it's beautiful
towns.
city,
It's a great state. I loved my time there. I miss it a lot. The fall, it's just gorgeous. So all of our Carolina listeners, we love you. Let's bang some heads down there and get these wildlife traffickers out of the United States. It's just Well, here's something they can traffic. There was a new wasp species discovered this week.
What?
So this one, this was cool because it's a parasitic wasp too. So let's send it on the traffickers.
Now we're talking about.
Not only is it
Biological warfare. All right, continue.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I used to do, right? And so the headline is New Wasp Species with a Giant Stinger Discovered in Amazonia.
All right.
So this wasp has a huge stinger. And I always put the pictures of the new species up on the show notes. It was found by researchers from the University of Turku out of Finland.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a parasitic wasp, but what this one does is it goes and stings spiders, and then the spider's paralyzed and it lays its eggs. Okay. And then the larvae eat the spider, erupt from the dead spider, maybe eat the spider eggs. I know. These things are like out of a horror story. Yeah. And then they, grow up and become new ones and repeat the cycle. So, but they're keeping, they actually probably, we don't want to ship in species around the world because that's how we get into all these troubles of, trying to mess with nature.
Yeah, you'll get the next Zika virus doing that. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking like Guam, we did the story of the fruit bat.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Guam, with the snakes and everything that have been invasive there, and all these native wildlife have plummeted. So now spiders are like huge on Guam.
Oh, wow.
Like their spider population's going through the roof.
Taking over. Huh.
Yeah. They need some of these wasps over there. Jeez. But then if we do that, then we're going to bring another problem. But yeah, it's the rare Clistopagaya genus. Mm-hmm. And it just, I just thought it was cool that this huge stinger and it's just this parasitic wasp. It's really cool. So that was my new species of the week. What did you find?
So I actually found this one in person. I've got it's a bit special to me. So a little bit of backstory. I met this a Dutch guy while I was traveling, and he was telling me about his research he was doing. And I didn't think too much of it at first because I'm like, oh yeah, it's just some obscure seabird that just hangs out one of the islands off of New Zealand, and it's really interesting. But the likelihood of me ever seeing it's really low. So how much interest would I have in this? Well, the thing is that we created such a good friendship. He invited me to come see this bird. And what I didn't realize is that his research, he was actually trying to determine if this bird that he was measuring and observing is actually a different species than we think it is. Mm-hmm. And so my friend Johannes Fischer, he's a PhD candidate at a University of Victoria down in Wellington. And he recently published a paper that has suggested that this population of South Georgia diving petrels down on Codfish Island, or otherwise known as Whenua-Ho, is a unique species. And he named it the Whenua-Ho diving petrel. And they're actually incredible little birds. He calls them flying penguins. Because they waddle around like penguins on the ground. They're very good at swimming and diving, but they're terrible at walking. And so that's kind of how they get their name. But they're only about 7 inches long or 20 centimeters. They're pretty much black and white. They've got a very short neck, but they have these little blue web feet that are absolutely adorable. And they make this purring call when they fly around at night. That's really cool to hear. It's very unique. It's not something you'd expect out of a seabird. And they're really, really incredible. There's only about 150 of them left.
Oh, wow. Okay.
They used to be found throughout the subantarctic of New Zealand, over potentially on Macquarie Island, possibly on the mainland of the South Island. But because of increased predation by exotic predators or in competition from other seabirds, they basically disappeared, except for this one population that exists on just 1 kilometer of sand dunes on this one little island just off the coast of New Zealand. Yeah,
it's kind of a common theme here, right? And I don't want to give up next week. Next week, stay tuned. Next week's going to be a good week. It's got some amazing stories coming out, and what's kind of going on here in New Zealand. It's Jesse Bryn. Jesse's partner, they're here in New Zealand. Both work hard in conservation. They're recruiting me to help them do some of this stuff, and I will be out there trudging around here soon.
That's right.
So there are a lot of people. Yeah, I know. I got to join the army because there's so many amazing people everywhere. Oh, all right, Jesse. Well, it's looking for these good stories, but there is some good stuff out there, and I think we're weaving a story of kind of giving a snapshot of what's going on around the earth.
Yeah.
And I never forget to remind myself there isn't, like I just said, people like you, like Bryn, researchers that we're interviewing, people out in the field that we're interviewing, Jim Winepress, who we've had on, what he's doing for conservation. His sister, he brought up his sister a couple weeks ago, doing research in dolphins there in South Carolina. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people doing a lot of good. So, we're just bringing this up for awareness, spreading the word, spreading education, but there is things that are getting better. So chin up, right?